For today's YouTube video, we have a wonderful best of 5 between two amazing StarCraft 2 players. It's going to be Clem versus herO from the most recent AfreecaTV Champions Tournament, and it is the quarterfinals as well. Things already getting started with a classic herO maneuver, so let's get the introductions done and over with. In the bottom left, we have Team Liquid's Clem. On the top right, we do have herO, whose clan is not on his account. Tisk tisk. But as I said, a very typical herO move, going for one of the earliest probe scouts possible. Now, this can sometimes be because they are planning on doing something kind of nefarious, but oftentimes, especially from the likes of herO, just means they want to get to harassing as much as possible. Of course, the other side effect is that you're going to be scouting your opponent as fast as possible, and with the amount of proxy barracks that we do see in this matchup, that is obviously going to be a benefit as well. But yeah, I think he just really likes being annoying, because that is something that herO does really, really well. Not that he always has to take control of the matchup, but oftentimes he does, even though a lot of the time in other matchups and other TVPs, we're going to have the Protoss kind of be on the more defensive side, at least until they're on two bases. herO very commonly changes that dynamic. So already you can see two gases back at home for herO, means that he's going to be aggressive, and we do have that proxy pylon coming down for what should be a proxy Stargate. Now, Clem is no fool. Clem knows who he is facing. There's no weird, like, barcode hovering over the name or something like that, but he has not chosen to go for an SEV scout. So is that a little bit foolish against a guy like herO? I mean, you could say so, but with a factory expand, kind of the idea is that you're going to already be taking the economic hits, so if you can avoid the SEV pull to actually go for the scouting, you kind of want to, because you're going to be covered by the factory expand to a degree anyways. You're going to have a very, very important structure for the defense earlier on than a 1-Rax expand. And you're also going to hopefully be able to figure out anything nefarious going on with the Reaper timing anyways. So an SEV scout, not necessarily super worth it. If you were, let's say, ultra paranoid, then you could try your best. But as I said, Clem is no fool. If there was going to be a Protoss that he was ultra paranoid about doing a 1-base build, which he now confirms is a 1-base build, just the lack of Nexus there, you know, he would SEV scout, but the meaning here is that he probably doesn't think that it's worth it, and I would say that he is correct. Even if he were to find that it's a proxy Stargate, he wouldn't be able to do very much about it except just, you know, build stuff at home, which he's already doing. He's already going to be building all of these types of units that will help against basically anything that could be proxied off of that one base. Now, caveat, right, is that if this was something like a 4-gate, like a good old-fashioned 1-base 4-gate, well, he might have wanted a bunker. So that lack of scouting ultimately can be problematic if a Protoss is really playing off meta. But the Reaper actually just went over there to scout for an Oracle. I was able to find it, right? So it could be here a lot of the times. And this time, this location would be as close as possible to the main, within reason anyways. So the Reaper kind of found it on its way. Confirmed it. Now the Marines and the Cyclone just have to be in position. And with the Adepts also being scouted, you know, there's really not much front pressure that can be applied, and that's the downside of herO's build against a factory expander, which, you know, herO was probably ready to accommodate for, and certainly scouted with his super fast probe. But you don't get that classic multi-pronged harassments where the Terran player is literally being torn apart by very limited units because they're trying to defend their natural expand as well. Clem could have tried going for a natural expand on the natural, but since he knew it was a 1-base build, kind of why would you do that, right? So this is the setup. Both basically understood each other almost to a T. Like, there's really nothing that both players didn't expect from each other as far as the openers so far. But herO has done something a little bit weird, but not something that is entirely new. Triple Oracles coming in here, immediately laser beaming down that Cyclone, and even going after the tank with that pulsar beam. The tank does fall rather quickly. Stasis trap cleverly placed as well. The SCV is going to pop it, yes, but then also in doing so blocks its own command center. trying to go for the second Cyclone was a bit ambitious. There were some weakened SCVs from earlier that the Oracles might have been able to get a bit more of. You know, this one and this one primarily, but not really able to do so. Only 4 SCVs, really not all that bad. The second Cyclone popping out was a godsend. And then just the amount of Marines, as this was a relatively quick reactor, just the Reaper right into a reactor. So, good hold so far. Again, that 3 Oracle change-up can be problematic. You know, if, I guess if Clem wasn't as good as he was, there's a lot more kerfuffle that is happening. 3 Oracles do one-shot SCVs. They need 2 for the other races workers, but 3 for SCVs with their extra health. So it can be really devastating, but obviously herO wanted to go for a little bit more of a gut punch, went after the army, trying to get a snowball effect. Didn't really happen. Now just down to one single Oracle. Cyclone leads the charge in an attack through the middle of the map and dies, because it did go up the ramp a little bit prematurely. Now herO did have to kind of ASAP get prepared for this. The Oracle was able to see it, just maybe enough in time, or the Adepts were, something like that. Speaking of the Adepts, it seemed like an accidental shade to me, but could have been that he wanted to see the extent of the push. So if there are reinforcements, that would tell you how obviously committed the Terran is to it. But yeah, he had to get ready in a hurry. Thankfully, he is almost ready to go. That shield battery, very forward placed, however, does get shot down pretty quickly. Once the tank sieged up within range of the Stalkers using said shield battery, that was kind of a problem. Big blink forward to get rid of the major problem of the push, which was that tank. But it is going to cost herO a lot to actually trade this out. So far, not too bad to the probes. Although, as I said, like 4 extra probes went down. 7 still not all that bad. If we could stop just before 10, that'd be amazing. And we will stop barely before 10. And 9 probes might be what Clem kind of wanted from that push. He is now 9 workers behind, which is a lot more in line with what you would want as the Terran player versus a Protoss player, but I think there's other issues. 1, 2 Oracles once again here. Again, not one-shotting the SCVs, but still doing a lot of damage potentially, a lot of harassment, and a lot of scouting. So the amount of, you know, tricks that Clem has to throw here to make up for anything else is quite low. And, well, speaking of low things, things that shoot up. Oh, wow, this is a huge problem. SCVs have to be pulled to stop that tank from going down. There is a backup tank that herO knows about, but he still wants to grab it. Goes for that last shot on the weakened tank. Takes a couple of shots from the Marauders and the tank that was on that ramp. All in all, some trading going down here. Who actually comes out ahead? Technically, it is going to be herO. Yeah, losing less on the minerals, just a slight bit more on that gas. But you remember I talked about how those 9 probes might not actually be enough, because while they do put the worker count within range of what you would want, so about 8 SCVs, they're made up by the 2 mules that you have on 2 orbitals, right? There are other problems. And the other problem primarily that I was thinking of was the fact that this 3rd base was already done. So that's throwing a wrench into things. The probes might have just been transferred, or maybe they were pulled for something. I'm actually not too certain. That was weird. I kind of caught them being micro. I don't know why. But anyways, but yeah, that means triple probe production, triple chrono, right? Which meant the worker losses from earlier quickly still went back into herO's favor. Now, for the Protoss side of things, they do need that economic advantage. They need to have that economy to build enough of the basic gateway units when you go for this style anyways, to actually overwhelm what is far more effective bio-medevac units, right? So that is the conundrum for herO. He still needs to buy a little bit more time. You know, charge needs to finish, and then you actually have to get the warp-ins going, which so far, only 8 zealots warped in. That's really not all that impressive. He's definitely going to need another warp-in, especially as many of the SCVs have been pulled. It's almost like a mini SCV pull, mini choo-choo train. Shield battery overcharge is going to help a whole of a damn lot, and that actually stops Clem in his tracks, not even able to dive after it. And this actually ends up being a super easy hold. Frankly, the amount of army that Clem had actually sent across the map wasn't all that impressive. Even without the extra warp-ins that happened, I was still nervous, because this is typically a weak point of the Protoss's defense in a game like this, where they've only just barely gotten to a settled economy. So if they only barely got to the settled economy, they have a limited amount of time to get to units, but apparently that's just, it was not an issue. So much had happened in the rest of the game, army-wise. Clem had lost a lot of army, not being able to handle those oracles as savagely as he was hoping for. that it did end up being one of the most lackluster mid-game SCV pools that I have seen, but a very fun game for sure. Pretty much non-stop action. herO takes game number 1. Let's see what happens in the rest of the series. Map number 2 will be on Cosmic Sapphire. We have top left Clem, bottom right herO. Both these players will be in DreamHack Atlanta, happening just shortly after this video is released, I believe. And both of them probably going to do pretty well. Probably. Although Clem has kind of yet to prove himself in an offline tournament, mostly dominating and really doing quite well in the online tournaments, particularly the regionals. Yeah, regionals is where Clem shines. Elsewhere, other factors are at play, and sometimes, honestly, there are just tournaments that have a kind of magical effect on players. Typically, that involves like a crowd energy or, you know, home turf situation, something like that. But it kind of just happens almost randomly. And for Clem, it seems almost random, almost, that he is consistently the European regional champion. Actually, the more you think about it, the more surprised you are, because, you know, he is facing so many great players. But anyways, herO coming in from that Korean scene on the GSL, actually winning it, being the first Protoss champion in quite some time, years, and then not doing so you know, as well the next time around, but still well enough. Gonna go to Atlanta as one of the most promising players to win it. Probably not the most promising player unless you're a huge fanboy or girl like I am. I'd be very much happy if herO won. I'd also be extremely happy if Clem won. You basically have two of the funnest players, I think, for their races, just as stories and as play styles. But once again, we do have herO starting things off with a 1-base proxy Stargate. So Clem, this time around, does opt to go for an SCV scout, but that has more to do with the fact that he went for a 1-Rex expand. So, you know, really 2 things can lead to this. Well, really 3 things, because one of the things could just be like, he feels like it. But then the second thing, right, is going to be Cosmic Sapphire, a larger map, the largest map that we have, especially when it comes to rush distance. And then the other thing that might impact a decision like this is just the variation. It's just, you know, having a variety, always trying to keep your opponent off guard. But this now has that complication like I was talking about in the last game, which is that you're going to be pulled different directions as the Terran. So you're not going to have that nice, safe, feel totally fine 1-base defensive scenario that also gives you another high ground. And this map actually doesn't have a high ground ramp, so it's really a bit risky. But so far, Clem is handling this as well as you would think, with the Reaper micro going well. The SCV scout was able to give him that a little bit of advance notice, and he has gotten the bunker in time, protected the command center to actually let it finish, and has already dealt with the early pressure, which was bound to be a little less effective, like the Zealot being chroned out, for instance, because again, it is a larger map. But another key difference is that Clem, you know, he's, again, a smart guy. He's going to realize there's going to be the extra complication. There's not much you can do to stop the extra complication, the being pulled in different directions, when you are limited to a certain number of production facilities. You don't really change it up. Even if you're going to a 2-1-1 scenario, so it would be a second barracks right now, it's still not a lot of units, right? So what can you do to cover that and still gain your economic lead? Well, missile turrets. And this would not be worth it, I think, if herO were to literally only go for 1 Oracle into a Twilight Council. But then herO doesn't really want to do that because herO did invest into this. This isn't a second base proxy Stargate. It was all on 1. So he's already taken a significant economic hit. Clem has gotten ahead just by having that 1-Rex expand. So really, herO almost has to, gamble's not the right word, but he basically has to accept that he's been almost hard countered. Clem literally building missile turrets in the mineral line stops all forms of that mineral harassment, which only leaves, you know, armies battling each other, which, you know, you got to be careful about. That pulsar beam can be nasty sometimes, that magical damage piercing through any armor that would otherwise save you. But so far, so good. And doesn't quite get the second Oracle, but, you know, keeping 2 oracles injured, killing a 3rd one. That is pretty damn good. So yeah, Clem he's covered his bases quite literally. Now, what I really like from herO, though, he's able to adapt on the fly. Excuse me, I need more water. So he's able to adapt on the fly, which is not surprising for a guy who has this type of playstyle. Oftentimes, those who are one-trick ponies, whether it's macro or like a cheese, they're going to be rigid. When something goes wrong, they're not particularly good at it. Maybe the cheesers will be a little better at it than someone who really is by the book, but ultimately, if you don't have variety in your own playstyle, a variety in the game is going to really trip you up. herO, besides being an extremely experienced player playing for so many years, even back in Brood War, he also is just that really fun player that tries out a lot of different things, willing to experiment. One of the reasons he has also been the kind of pioneer of the new PvZ. So the change up in this game, right, I was saying that Clem is just, he's basically hard countered herO. If herO had stopped building oracles and said, ah, you got me, and then just did kind of like a regular old transfer into 2 bases, get your gateways, get your Twilight Council, there's not much gained there. There's in fact nothing gained there. It's just probably just losses. So herO, yeah, he goes into kind of a comical number of oracles again as one changeup. He also went for a much faster 3rd base behind all the oracles. The oracles obviously do a great job of scouting, so you can hopefully defend a base like this, but they also cannot be underestimated in terms of their army potential. The stasis trap, absolutely perfect, I would say. About half of the army taken out of the equation means that Clem cannot continue the push as is, but Clem is choosing to stand his ground. He's choosing to rally across one of the larger maps that we have into the 2 shield batteries that will have an overcharge and into a handful more units as they warp in, right? But he's hoping it'll be enough, especially since 2 Cyclones with their lock-on are still ready to go. It does not look to be the case. All he does is force the overcharge, and I guess he killed 1 more Oracle by the looks of things. But that was not quite what he was hoping for. So herO doing an excellent job flexing his flexibility. You know, it's got to be very frustrating to Clem to basically, again, hard counter the opener and then not get anything done when the Protoss kind of, you know, greedily risky maneuver goes for a faster 3rd base, because it was a faster 3rd base. You know, 7 minutes at this point, it being done is not a surprise, but it was faster. It's already getting saturated, and other Protosses would have mishandled the transition quite severely. I mean, I think a lot of other Protosses simply would not have been able to defend despite the scouting information the Oracles have given. Now, the Oracles have mostly been good in terms of scouting and that stasis trap. Their usability is quickly waning here, and stasis traps are no longer going to be the gotcha move by the looks of things, as Clem happy to use a scan to get that done and over with. So the 3 Oracles, certainly as the armies continue to expand, don't help with the armies anymore either. They're great for some of the earlier engagements, but then they're only used for revelations and maybe stasis traps. So herO has to really dig deep to try and get a big enough army, but Blink is not done, +1 is not done, shield battery is easily sniped, Immortal not done either. The timing here from Clem is absolutely too brutal. A Terran who waits 20 extra seconds because they're kind of guessing and him and hawing and saying, well, what if he has this? What if he has that? Well, what if I just try to attack up this same location over and over and over again? They're not going to actually take advantage of the situation. If herO had an Immortal and +1 and Blink for 20 seconds, he's, first of all, blinking, microing over here, maybe getting a Marauder or 2, and then he's fighting on the front of the shield battery, as opposed to behind it, which is what happened because he had to retreat so much, right? So really, 15 seconds, 10 seconds maybe even, could have been a huge change in the hold potential of herO. At the end of the day, he was still in that very awkward position the Protoss can find themselves in when they go for the mass gateway style, which is trying to get that economy to then go into a big burst of units, because Bio with Medivacs is just so damn effective. Didn't actually get there this time, so that would be the biggest change really between these 2 games. While that, and of course that Clem had a little bit more of a hard counter opener, certainly did a better job of retaining units. So even when he was denied doing any damage over here, one thing that was quite critical was that he was not punished for the move out. There was nothing herO could really do to chase after him and kill some units. So he came in with a much higher army supply and basically stimmed to win at that point. So now it is all tied up. Let's continue on. Game number 3 on Data C. Bottom left, we have Clem. Top right, we do have herO. You guys might notice that there's suddenly a cat on the screen. I know a lot of people out there do love the cat cam feature, so let me know if you would like it on these types of videos, or if it's just, you know, taking up too much space and not too helpful. And by the way, herO, despite not having his clan tag and his team name on this account, is from Dragon Phoenix Gaming, DPG. So definitely shout out to them for picking up a lot of great players. So 1-1. Very similar openers back-to-back from this Protoss, but not similar openers from Clem. He, as I said, basically hard countered what herO was planning on doing, because it really is a kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for herO if Clem actually manages to hold against the early rush units, right? That doesn't start a snowball, and then he gets those missile turrets up. Then there's, you know, you can't not do something with your Oracle opener, so you can't say, okay, never mind the Oracle opener, let's just go into other things. But you also you're going to find it very difficult to actually do damage with the Oracles you do get. So herO, far less exchanges happening in that game, even though he almost managed to turn it around by some savvy thinking things through. By being really clever, realizing that he has a chance to kind of thread the needle with the economy game into a big burst of units, and if Clem was a less aggressive, less confident, and less good player overall, to identify that there would be an opening, that he would always need to be looking for that opening, then there is a chance that herO still makes that comeback happen. And I'm not saying this just because, one, I guess I'm a herO fangirl, so maybe the bias is showing, or two, because I said this was possible and then it didn't happen, so like I'm trying to cover my own mistakes. I'm saying this a lot because, one, I still believe I'm correct, but then two, because I have seen herO do so many of those comebacks. Not just herO, but a lot of the Protosses as well. That is basically what, at least I personally identified. I'm sure many others have, but this is something that I've been really thinking critically on. What is the main problem with anything that kind of goes into that 3-base gateway setup? So you're not going into 2-base Colossus, you're not going into some, I don't know, very fast Storm, I suppose. You're going into something that requires, you know, kind of a lot of units. Playing to the, what was one time the new style of Protoss, now is very old. That is the Legacy of the Void Mass Gateway style. So you need to have that strong economy, which is where the threading the needle thing comes in, right? You still need to handle all the things the Terran throws at you, or you do to yourself. So if you go for an earlier cheese, right, it doesn't work out. In this game, Clem has opted to go for another factory openers, and this time he is dedicating more to it as a pressure build than he did in the first game, which was used rather defensively, because he scouted what his opponent was doing, and his opponent was doing something cheesy. So now that he scouted that it's an actual Nexus, so herO is really changing things up, he goes ahead and goes offensive, a couple more units coming out for harassment, 3 Reapers, 2 Hellion, like a TVT opener, and then throws that command center on location. herO has actually done no scouting. So he's completely changed things up from the aggressor to the defender. He's looking for something like this. He might not have anticipated that many early game units. It's not totally uncommon to see this type of opener, but remember that herO had zero idea as to what to truly expect. He was basically guessing. And with that many units, 3 Stalkers, all combined, might have been enough. But catching one out of location and then a little bit of a snowball is going to cause a huge snowball in this game. 6 probes going down already. 1 Hellion at the main, 1 Hellion in the natural, hoping to get some cheeky kills. This one in the main, gonna go down pretty quickly. Thankfully, that 4th unit finally popped from the warp gate. But it is 7 probes killed, which puts them within 5 workers of each other. I'm gonna catch the when the probe's actually finished. So that's not ideal for a Protoss, because the Terran does have 2 mules now being slapped down. So you want to be at least 8 workers ahead, really, as the Protoss. What's really going to change things up, though, is that even though herO did opt for a macro defensive setup, he still is doing something a little bit different. He has opted for a 2-base robo opener. This could still go into a robotics bay type play, but for now it is just going into warp prism harassments and then a faster 3rd Nexus, not the fastest, but faster than if you were going to play conservatively on 2 bases for gas. So that's not what herO's doing. He's not really playing conservatively. He's actually using the robo typically a less aggressive tool, but obviously that Warp Prism is the biggest aggressive thing you can get, and using it aggressively. So Warp Prism out first, pick up 4 Stalkers. 4 Stalkers do one-shot SCVs, so you can probably find, if you're really good, and the Terran's not as good, you could probably find up to 10 SCVs, honestly. Because if you're really active with the Warp Prism, the Terran doesn't really want to add on a Viking this early on. They want to get their 2 medevacs and start their own aggression. And depending on the build order, they might not even have the starport done, right? So it's likely the Warp Prism gets to do some consistent damage. Cyclone is the wrench and things that you have to just basically all entirely avoid. So Clem, this might be experience talking. He also might be thinking through things, but this is actually sometimes a dangerous thing to do, what Clem is doing. Putting your units only to guard a Warp Prism. Imagine this scenario in an 8-minute, 9-minute PvT. When are the Zealots from this side going to come in, is the question, right? Like, when's the army about to attack into me? Oh, shit. But in this scenario, it's so early on with that Warp Prism that it's basically almost impossible for the Protoss to really have a fighting army ready to go to take advantage of out-of-position units. So Clem just literally bodied the, or cornered rather than bodied, cornered the Warp Prism, let it out because there's just so much space on Data C, and moves on with his life. herO took the time, at least with that Warp Prism as well as the scouting, to try and add on a Templar Archives and go into Storm. So he did go for pretty fast 3rd and 4th gases, but then went right into Twilight Council. So the gas had to go somewhere. It is going into Archons, and then, as I said, maybe into Storm later on. Right now, it's going to have to be Archons. He's looking for the feedbacks, which you don't usually see too often. He does get it. It might even seem kind of comical, like, oh, feedbacking what is fresh medevacs. Is that helpful? Yeah, actually. You basically now have a medevac-less army, which you know just isn't as good. Now, that was pretty bold of the Warp Prism to try and warp in on the army. But what can happen there is it can change the threat of certain units. Maybe all those Zealots suddenly were being attacked by the tank. Then if of course, it doesn't change the threat and it just warps in, then suddenly the units are literally right on top of you, right? So there is a reason to do so bravely, put that Warp Prism forward, but it did get sniped. Which Clem, you know, he kind of wants to do that, not just for the complication of the army fight, which it looks like he wasn't going to win anyways, but also because now you don't have to worry about a Warp Prism. And you probably don't have to worry about it for a little while, because we're still in the starting stage, really, of a 3-base setup. Although I am incorrect, the Warp Prism's already here. herO was like literally instantly rebuilt that shit, okay. But that is a choice, right? So the reason I was saying that it sometimes is a long pause of having a Warp Prism is that 275 minerals is not particularly cheap right now, especially if you feel like you're still under pressure. That may be one of the reasons that herO decided to go for it immediately. He figured, okay, I'm okay for the next couple of minutes, or because he knows that it's worth his there. Delaying a round of probes, an upgrade, a couple of Zealots, absolutely worth it. And when you are going right to that Storm, really one of your number one priorities is to ferry that thing around to the Warp Prism. So that's why there's such an emphasis on rebuilding that. So Clem doesn't really get much reprieve of a Warp Prism, doesn't get much breath here. He still has to deal with the Warp Prism, but not in the harassment way. He still has to deal with it in the microing storms around way. And he doesn't have any ghosts. So what he's going to opt for is just a split. Hopefully the Widow Mines connect with the Zealots, take them out of the equation, and then maybe a Viking will finally come around and kill that Warp Prism. But the damage is already there, guys. herO coming in with one heck of a wallop, and it does force Clem off of that 3rd base, which is going to already be good enough to give herO a substantial lead. Clem's going to try and go for the army kill, which I think is absolutely the correct call. No more Storms, upgrade lead for the bio, and still plenty of it left over, right? The Storms did a great job dispersing it and pushing it back, but still a lot left with healing as well, and herO's army isn't as powerful as it may appear. You know, 3 Archons, couple of Immortals, there is definitely a backbone there, right? There's something chonky there. It's going to take a while to actually kill. And a couple of Widow Mines try and kill some probes. They will at the last second. But, as I was saying, once the Guardian Shield's gone, once the Immortal Shields are popped, and if you do a great job getting that concave, the Archons aren't as effective as they can be, Clem's army was pretty good. And he had those Vikings finally popped to make sure the Warp Prism was no longer there to reinforce or to have any sneak attack High Templars. still locked and loaded in there. So far so good on the emergency defense, and it absolutely was an emergency. There's not much a Terran player can do at that particular timing. To afford ghosts is quite difficult. Now, when you're 3-base saturated, it's pretty much what you should be doing. But actually getting to the Ghost Academy and then making the ghost takes time. Basically, that's exactly when herO is looking to do the damage that he did. Right afterwards, should he not win the army fight, should he not win the entire game, he does have to worry about how effective ghosts are going to be against this army. Popping the Archon shields, popping the High Templar energy, and even getting rid of a Guardian shield. Very effective. But I would say, arguably, the Viking is probably the most effective thing here. The Warp Prism wants to be pushed away, at the very least, from hitting the heart of the Terran army, which has only happened to a degree. Still a couple of those storms hitting strong. Not enough ghosts to actually take out these frontline Archons, which are getting low, but not quite dead yet. One more is going to get taken down, but there's still so much Protoss left over. herO now at least has also one upgrade helping him out, so maybe this will be the killing blow. It is going to be a high ground stance here for Clem as he once again comes away with the initial army fight with maybe just enough to make this defense work, but at the end of the day, he'd still have to deal with all the repercussions of having that third base lift once again, down 19 workers as well. And you can see with that army supply that it was absolutely herO's game to win, and he did. So herO, consistent pressure, excellent use of the Warp Prism High Templar, and Clem not able to kind of keep up on the pacing, not able to actually get any one of those actually good fights to give him a leg up. So herO extends his lead, or takes the lead, I guess, again with a 2-1. Let's move on. Game number 2 will be on Tropical Sacrifice. In the top right, it is a Liquid Clem. Bottom left, DBG herO. So herO kind of controlling that last game a little bit. Past the opener anyways, which, I remember, the opener was fairly effective for Clem. He basically did enough damage to warrant delaying his command center. So, you know, obviously if that was a 1-rank expand, he doesn't have much damage. He's really quite in the lead. Without it, he's maybe just covered his deficits. But I would say he did more than cover it. I think he did actually gain a legitimate lead for a second there. But herO, he's a wily man. He knows how to get himself out of pickles, and he played quite a beautiful strategic game, obviously with the execution as well on the actual microing of the army. Clem was pretty close to having basically the first fight around his third be problematic for herO. So initially it looks really exciting for the Protoss, right? They're kicking butt, they're storming the Terran, they're getting their SCVs pulled away from the base, and it just looks like they're going to win the game. But this happens to a lot of people, pros and casuals alike. The Terran kind of collects their army, right? This happens in I think, ZVT and PvT, but you think, oh, the Balins are rolling in, there's not that much left over, oh, the storms are coming in, there's not that much left over, and then the actual Terran army comes together again, and you realize, oh, their splits are pretty good, oh, they're reinforcing during that entire time, oh, I underestimated the effect of medevac healing, oh, my screen just didn't cover the 20 army supply that was off to the left. And then suddenly you're in over your head because you've expended all of your storms, all of that AoE that kind of covers the potential army supply deficit, and you are being concaved and maybe even SCV pulled, because Terrans, especially in this matchup, less so versus Banelings, but in this matchup can identify very, very well the pros can anyways, when a tremendous army victory will be more important than keeping as many SCVs as possible. So if they already have taken a hit to the SCV line, but they could slam dunk victory the army fight, as it was close to doing in the last game, then they might be able to run across the map and do even more economic damage to you, all while muling to temporarily cover their economic losses. So Clem kind of wanted to do that. herO identified it. He got out of dodge before, pretty much just before he got collapsed in on, and then was able to defend, yeah, anything else that happened, I guess. Which it really was just herO prepping for yet another attack afterwards. So not so much defending as he was just preparing for round number 2. Clem's going to go back to 1-Rex expand. go into some quick Hellions. Was a wonderful fan, right? And then try to go for a couple of Marines. This 4 Marine hit squad thing has been literally hit or miss. I've seen it get torn down like this, and I've also seen it from some other Terrans get that little brief. Oh, okay, you're doing that from the Protoss. So in this case, the 2 Adepts are able to find the Marines with micro to spare, I guess is the best way to put it. So they saw it and they were able to make sure they didn't just literally shade into the Marines, of which they might not be able to micro. And they didn't literally miss the Marines. So then the 4 Marines show up while you have been ineffective at your Adept harassment. So 2 Hellions did not shoot up, guys. But 2 Wood of Mines would. I see 1 Wood of Mine, and the other one is yet to be burrowed. Was a little scared of the Oracle, actually. Oh, it's gonna get popped by the first Wood of Mine. I was gonna say, he was scared of the second Wood of Mine being popped. So did a little mini mass repair, but I don't think either one of them was expecting the other Wood of Mine to actually do that damage. herO was just ever so close to getting out of its range before it shot. That's really one of the most important. Oh no, this one was just pretty blatant. Oh boy, that's just a mistake on herO's part. Okay. That's the important aspect of going for the follow-up to Wood of Mines, is also their defensive use, because otherwise, especially when your Marines have all been killed, you just don't have a lot of units to attack with. And now Clem's gonna get the Wood of Mine drop. Just 1. Oh my goodness, thought it was actually gonna hit. 1 into the natural, 1 into the main. Phoenix were made to stop this. They can lift the Wood of Mine, right? Which might mean they can't kill the medevac, but that's okay. Oh boy, Champion Hellion, man. Champion Hellion, not gonna get the lineup. Just kidding. Bronze Hellion, not Champion. And now 3 Adepts are back on this side of the map, looking to do even more damage. But as really key units pop for Clem, so the timing here not ideal for herO. In fact, that's the narrative for the entire game. The timing is not good for herO. He's just seconds away from noticing the Wood of Mines to save 2 Oracles. He's seconds away from, I guess, the Phoenix maybe finding the medevac a bit faster, stopping that from even denying mining. He's seconds away from the first Adepts. Well, actually, those were okay. Those were okay. But the second Adept pair's actually doing some damage. And now he's got to face this mech-based attack. So a lot of the style that Clem is showing here, the opener and the follow-up, all used defensively fantastic, as we can see. It's coming out at critical moments, for sure. Also could have been used to be constantly attacking the Protoss. So the 4 Marines get into the natural, the Protoss goes, huh, what, hey? Maybe doesn't do that much damage, but still forces everything back. Gets a little bit of scouting down as well. Then you've got the Hellion follow-up, and they're like, oh, okay, I gotta deal with this. Again, maybe not that much damage. Then you have the Wood of Mine drop follow-up, and then again, maybe not that much damage. But there's a lot of maybes in this sentence. And then after all that, you have maybe one more kind of more gut punch maneuver. So it's a little bit of dancing around, doing a couple of jabs, then right with a huge sucker punch down the middle. Can be devastating to a lot of Protosses, but so far, it's herO doing a little more toe-to-toe. A little more. I would still say that he's kind of on the back foot. He is the one that's reeling a little bit, but he is now able to recover fully, at least in terms of control of the game. So he's the one now feeling confident going on the other side of the map, not having to deal with any forms of harassment. But just because he's on Clem's side of the map doesn't necessarily mean that he's ahead, right? It just means that he feels like he can do something here. Take the reins a little bit. But at the end of the day, Clem, totally fine defensively, is still building up a very powerful army. Yeah, the Cyclone's not as impressive as it was earlier on. The Vikings might not be that impressive with only 2 of them as well, but they might still help. In the air or grounded, actually. Liberator is not really all that important, but what it does do, not a whole lot of probe kills, right? It does distract the Phoenix, so that's later scouting on this push, a big deal. The absence of picking up a Cyclone that would have gone farther ahead of the army potentially, that's a big deal. herO, as I've been saying, kind of a little more on the back foot. He's not really gotten to where he's wanted to be. He's never been in full control of the situation. Whenever he wanted to push into Clem, it was always Clem pushing back a little bit harder. And now we have that gut punch that herO is going to have a very difficult time actually holding. The shield battery overcharge in the main, as you can see, is more awkward than herO is hoping for. I love the hallucinated Colossus attempt. There's no scan to reveal that that is a hallucination, which I'm sure Clem knows it is, but that doesn't mean his units are not attacking it. But it looks like, the cleverness aside, there just simply wasn't enough, especially as some of it was not covered. Like, a lot of it was not covered by any shield battery overcharge. So herO, already down a lot in the army supply, is going to go for one last hurrah. He's going to be able to kill the tank, but not take care of the rest of the bio army. And Clem is going to be taking us to a game number 5, guaranteed. herO has no ace up his sleeve. There's no disruptor about to pop out, no DTs about to warp in. This is it, and it's not going to be enough. Doesn't even have that overcharge on the shield battery. One Immortal's not going to cover the deficit of army supply. As herO now at a 4th, a 5th. Going to be soon. It's 0 army supply in general. There is the tap out. GG, and game number 5 it is. Both of these players playing so aggressively, and sometimes even exchanging turns on who is aggressive. It's taken us to game number 5, and not quite record fashion, but probably one of the faster 5-game series. In the bottom right of now Moondance, we do have Clem. In the top left, that's my cat helping me observe, guys. We have DPG's herO. On a scale 1 to 10, Apollo's observing is 0. So, game number 5, both of these players trying to adapt both preemptively as well as on the fly against each other. I think maybe Clem is doing a little bit more of the adapting, but that's maybe only a little bit, maybe not even really correct. Maybe I don't believe my own sentence. You know, I think they're both very much looking at each other's play style, looking at each other's tendencies, and trying to react to that to a degree, or again, preempt it. So the only reason I'm saying is that maybe Clem is a little bit more on the reacting side, is just that I think when a Protoss maybe opens up really aggressively, like those proxy Stargates, they're a little more, how to say, like, well, dedicated, I suppose. But as I said, I'm not even believing my own sentence. It just could be that Protoss bias. Could be. We have the engineering bay block trying to really throw herO off, which you might look and say, oh, well, job not well done. Just take the other base, you know, what's the big deal? But this is really awkward. This definitely changes the way the Protoss has to defend certain follow-ups. So we can go ahead and get into that, actually. Clem is going for a factory expand. Moondance is an extremely popular map for Terrans to go for some of the early to mid-game pushes right down the middle. Very short rush distance here. And then a shared choke for 3 bases, while often looked at as a good defensive thing, can sometimes, you know, be a double-edged sword, because you don't have necessarily units coming in from multiple directions. You don't have reinforcements coming in from multiple directions, or, you know, just places to safely reinforce sometimes. So that's why it can be a double-edged sword. You know, just imagine, as it probably is very easy to do because you guys have seen it a million times, tank siege up here. You know, how does the Protoss come in other ways other than their own choke, which not the worst choke ever, but it is a choke. Sometimes high ground pylons will warp in over here. Sometimes I would say that Protosses even get really smart and start kind of preempting it by having a pylon over here, but that is part of the reason this map specifically can be a problem. Now, why is the back base a problem? It seemed so casual. herO didn't look bothered at all by having to take it. Well, first and foremost, it's a bit of a half base. So when it is saturated, it's 12 out of 12 instead of 16 out of 16. It's also only 1 gas instead of 2. So you're not really getting your money's worth in terms of Nexus, I suppose. The Nexus worth. Clem is going for a little bit of a faster Marine push instead of waiting for the Cyclone and second Cyclone as well. Hoping to catch herO off guard, kind of similar to what he was planning last game. This time around, it's not Adepts that catch it, though. It's Stalkers, which are prepared. And Stalkers do outrange those Marines, so properly controlled, they do excellent. The Cyclone, however, gonna change that dynamic. But herO just basically needs to take this calmly. As long as he's not surprised by it, and the shield battery is gonna make this a no-brainer, and you can deal with this, because ultimately this isn't much covering the Cyclone. The Cyclone is a bit of a glass cannon, and, you know, it has to be microed really quite perfectly to actually get that lock on without taking any return damage. So Clem's gonna try and win this micro war with the help of not even the brush. It's not even a brush, it's like lights. Blinding lights. And that will work, kind of, but then it can also be used by herO, and, well, the dance continues. So, yeah, herO with the shield batteries, I think just maybe even over-defended, honestly. But he really did not want to take any unnecessary damage from those earlier kind of pokes, because they're really the appetizer to the entree, to the main dish that is going to be a potential tank push. And that's more so what you have to worry about, and is absolutely what Clem is doing. So sometimes there's pushes of opportunity with how the game has gone. You just realize I can push them up the middle and probably do a lot of damage. And other times, many times, especially recently, it feels like there are just build orders that they're going to be building up to. So this is literally a starportless tank bio push that is going to try and abuse Moondance. But herO wasn't just defending with all of those maneuvers. He did go up to 3 gateways, not 4, but 3 is still enough to flex. So you can either go defensive with it, macro with it, or offensive with it by continuing to warp in round after round. And then if this offense turns into defense, well, great. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Clem is going to have a heck of a time pushing across the map against this many Stalkers, unless herO misjudges a blink up in the high ground, which I was kind of afraid of, but Sim is not done, so he is taking advantage of this beautifully and is about to go ahead and grab that stem, completely killing any counter push potential. A lot of Stalkers might die for it, but as long as it's not all of them, I would say it is worth it, as they also took down, oh, didn't actually pick up that one Cyclone locked on Stalker. They also took down a handful of army units too, so it wasn't a just, you know, a literal dive onto a single structure. But the structure was pretty important, so, oh, oh no, that was questionable. You know what? I figured he was going to do it too. If we could have slowed that down, like a 5th speed or something like that, I would have called herO going and blinking into that, regardless of its wisdom. And it was not wise. Oh, this is turning around so badly on herO. You know, technically, he's not going to lose every single Stalker. ZombieGrub, you said every single Stalker. Okay, calm down. No, that was terrible. That was a pretty much a point at which herO could have continued playing around, but he shouldn't have dove, and then just, you know, but by that point it was already kind of screwed. Going into the main, losing his Warp Prism 2 was just a really atrocious cherry on top. And now herO, I think, is dead. I don't think it matters if there's no stim. 45 army supply from Clem to just 13 of herO. herO invested a lot of resources into building an economy, not into building production. And his shield batteries aren't even done. So, oh boy, herO should have taken the chance to recall out of there. Would still have maybe 14 extra Stalkers, 12 extra Stalkers, and that would have been controlling this push the entire time. There's nothing that Clem could have done about it. He would have had to siege hop his tanks from the literal start of his base. If, let's say, even 8 Stalkers. You know what? Let's go even lower. Let's say there's literally only 6 Stalkers left from that. I still think that is a dramatic difference, because the way they can abuse a stimless army is painful. When, especially because you know that's on the way. Like, the herO is read into this. He knows what's happening, and he's going to control that every step as long as he can, which isn't very long, to be fair. Moondance, again, that short rush distance, one of the big reasons to do these types of pushes. But because he literally went down to 1 Stalker, I mean, it just had to get the heck out of there, right? Like, what's it going to do? 1 times 4 shot the Marine? Like, what? No. So that's I dare say it was a fairly big throw. That was, yeah, I think a golden opportunity. I'm actually going to take a second and look back to see that's blinking. That was so bad. See the Protoss pain. No, to see if there was any other reason he might not have recalled. No, just greed. Just, overconfidence. I personally would go to overconfidence. I think you always have to throw out there that the Protoss might have legitimately said I needed to do more. You know, they read the situation obviously differently with their limited information. but kind of having some insight to pro gamer minds, but then also I feel like having some insight into herO in particular. herO is not a stranger to bad, over-aggressive blinks and engagements. He's reined it back for the most part, but that was actually one of his biggest hurdles coming back into pro gaming a few years back. He was way too over-aggressive, and I think that occasionally shows, and it's not necessarily due to misinformation. I think it has a lot to do with his playstyle, often, riding that line in the first place and being kind of a risky gambit, but also him as a kind of personality, the personality that he shows in StarCraft anyways. But yeah, I think you have 11 Stalkers recalled out. The recall might be Clem's green light to try and do some type of stimless all in. And also, to be fair, herO doesn't know if he killed stim or combat shields, so that's also in play here. He might have figured a stim would have come in and killed all the weakened stalkers before they recalled out, which, okay, yeah. But, even then, let's say he does warp out 9 stalkers. It might be the green light for Clem to go across the map with stim. Maybe he hurries along, though stimming to get across the map is really dangerous for a Terran without medivacs. And you only have maybe this area to start controlling the push. I still think it's better. So that's a TLDR here. I still think it's better. And then perhaps that's knowledge that's, okay, now I'm on the back foot. Now I'm on the defensive. I've recalled out. Now I need to prepare for this. Would have also stopped herO from, I don't know, getting a couple extra probes, to be honest. That's all I can say about that. But that could be a big difference in the timing of the shield batteries. That's all I'll analyze for this final game. GG's to Clem, who moved on into the round of 4, as this was the round of 8s. Very fun series. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you for more StarCraft 2 casting in the very near future. Bye-bye.